Welcome to the Unexpected Podcast. This is Justin Mahwikizi, and today's guest, I'm very excited to introduce you to Christian Rath. Christian, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Justin. It's my pleasure to be on the podcast. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. You have a very storied career, but you've helped throughout your career, you've helped companies become more profitable. You helped nations reduce food loss. You helped farmers find sustainable futures, and helped family businesses survive across generations. But when you strip away all the titles and accomplishments, what problem have you been trying to solve your entire life?
Ultimately, it boils down to helping others becoming successful in whatever endeavor they are involved with. I did this whether I was running companies, starting companies, building companies, helping companies. It's all about people. Companies without people are empty boxes, maybe filled with money, but without people, there is nothing that can happen. So really is I would say investing in people.
That's great. Now, when you look back on your childhood, you spent time in Italy, France, Switzerland. What experiences first shaped your relationship with food, farming, and hard work?
Very interesting question. I've never asked myself because I did not grow up as a farmer. I did not study. I hold a doctorate degree in mechanical engineering, and I went back for a degree in theology. And farming started to appear only later in life as something close to my professional life. One day I saw an ad, I believe it was on LinkedIn, and I went to my wife and I said, what a bizarre job description, actually requirements in the job description, because among the requirements I remember, there was, it went like this: technical background, ability to work in autonomy, very knowledgeable in diplomatic work, multiple languages and travel, and something like this. I said, I've never done a diplomatic work. She said, that job is for you. And this is when I started to get involved with post-harvest losses, just a little bit, I would say, this was in 2013. And that's really when I started to realize the incredible opportunity that we have to make things better.
Absolutely. And you speak multiple languages and worked across continents. What did your parents teach you that still guides you in decisions you make today?
Here is how I will answer you. I come from a family that I had everything I needed. They provided everything I needed, but I had a hard time getting money to get haircuts more often than every 6 weeks. However, at the same time, I could get money every single day for two things: for books and for travel.
Wow.
So my mom forced me to read. I still today have a rule. This is just a goal. It's not I need, but my goal is to read 26 books a year. Why 26? It's one every 2 weeks. And sometimes it takes me 24 hours to read cover to cover. Sometimes it takes a month, especially when you have an autobiography or a biography that is 600 pages,
Yes.
like Isaacson Isaacson style. But going back to my parents, I would say these two things, and the third one is always respect your neighbor. So these three things, I think, have shaped my young age. Think about this: the first time I took an overnight train, I was 12 years old, and I was with my 11 years old brother, and we were traveling through Italy, Switzerland, Germany, all the way to France.
Wow.
And then my first trip alone by plane was at the age of 14 to England. And then I came to the US. I was 15 and a half and traveled 27 states alone. So that independence and that quench for discovery, for exploration, started very early in my life.
That's an amazing upbringing experiences for sure. And I can understand where your career has taken you based on that experience. Do you have a belief? Was there a belief that you held at 20 that life completely disproved?
When you grew up in Europe, you grew up with a certain degree of fatalism on your head. So it goes like this. It takes very different shapes and forms. It depends on the belief system. It depends on the upbringing. It depends on the culture. It depends on where you are. But basically, hold your lane because this is what you were born to do. One of the things that really caught my attention, but at a very deep level, was discovering in the US in 1978, when I came the first time, was to discover that there is another way to look into things where everything is possible as long as you work hard. Let me rephrase. No opportunity is impossible as long as you work hard. And that is something that I embraced, and one of the reasons I came to the U.S. I went to the U.S.
Great, great, great answer. Was there a failure that hurt the most, but ultimately became one of your greatest teachers?
By the age of 30, I owned 7 companies. I founded a company incubator, and I incubated 7 companies. So the plan was very simple. I was going to be the CEO of every of these companies, scale it, sell it, monetize. Very simple. Well, this was in Italy, and let me just say that when a bank director, when a branch manager looks at you and says, "Incubator, I did not know you were a doctor," meaning a medicine doctor.
Yes.
How many kids do you want to incubate? Like, no idea of that. So by the age of 40, I filed for bankruptcy. I lost my dream home. I was heavily indebted, and I had a very interesting experience where basically I came back to my childhood upbringing from a belief system standpoint, and I realized that there is more in life. And I would say, one can believe it or not, but it was really by a miracle that I got an offer from a company in the U.S. And I came to the U.S. and I came with $5 in my name. The ticket was paid for by my mom, and I reimbursed her 1 week later. So when these things happen and you are in the middle of your life, there is a few things that you readjust. So, for example, one thing that my wife and I did is to promise each other that every expense, with the exception of gas, every expense above, get this, $5, we would let the other know. In other words, there is building accountability, and this helped us tremendously. It took me a little while. We paid back every single debt, and I would say by the grace of God that today we are doing very well.
That's an amazing story. When you went through this experience, what helped you spiritually, psychologically withstand those shocks? Because most people tend to crumble and never get back up and never fully intend and make sure everybody gets paid. What was in you or instilled in you by your family that allowed you to push forward through those troubles?
My mom has always told me that I was born with a compass in my belly. And frankly, I cannot explain it other than to say I can be in the middle of the jungle or I can be in the middle of a desert. which I am in the middle of the jungle right now, and I can cite you examples of deserts, and I can always find my way out. But to answer your question, this is only tangential. There is something more, and it really comes, for me at least, from realizing that that the God I love, I worship, loves me individually, not collectively. It's not an abstraction of something, a deity that is here, or like other people, they worship nature. It's something that is collective. It's not something personal. And for me, it's personal. And that has really helped me. So my sister-in-law, one day in the midst of my darkest day, said something that I will never forget. I said, Christian, I don't know what you have, but you never give up. And later on in life, we had the privilege to see our son Christopher joining the Navy and going and attending the U.S. Naval Academy. It was a great privilege. He went to Annapolis, and we went there to visit quite often. And one of the things, military are filled with expressions, with things, way of saying. And there is one thing that is written in one of the halls of the U.S. Naval Academy, and it says, "Don't give up the ship." And so for me, you never give up. Don't give up the ship, or don't sink the ship. But the concept is the same: do not give up. And I think that resiliency that comes from one of my grandfathers who walked back from Leningrad at the end of World War II, and we were having a breakfast in the 60s. Why do I remember in the 60s? Because I was a kid, and I was working with him, helping him outdoors, and he had this pause at 10 o'clock in the morning, and I was always going with him. He would have a bowl of coffee with milk and some bread. That day, the bread I had was hard. And so I left it. I didn't eat it. And he looked at me and said, "Why you don't eat your piece of bread today?" I said, "Grandpa, it's hard." He looks at me, and this is what he said, Justin. He said, "Christian, hard bread is not hard. No bread is hard." I said, "Why do you say this?" And this is the first time he opened up about the World War II. He said, "I ate my belt and I ate my shoelaces." Both were made out of leather. Don't tell me that this is hard. It's another way to say don't give up. Here is a man that walked back from Leningrad that took 2 months to go back to his home. Who am I just to give up for what? A failure? You lose your home?
Right.
Your daughter-in-law has cancer. Your mom has cancer. You lose your dad at the age of 59. No, you press on. You continue on your path.
What was your grandfather's name that walked from Leningrad?
Charles, and he was my mom's father. So he goes. His last name is my mom's maiden name, Charles.
Charles was a tough guy, but he was a good grandfather to you. I'm glad you had that experience and you still remember it.
Yes, I do.
If we move to farming as a human story, you've worked in Africa, Europe, South America, or Central America you're in. What do farmers everywhere have in common regardless of country?
Well, first of all, they love what they are doing. I can say this from meeting with young female entrepreneur farmers in Kenya, all the way to Mzungus, to white people in Zimbabwe, to people in Nicaragua nested in the mountains and farming and growing cacao. They love what they do. There is a pride that is not the bad pride. Pride is a little bit like cholesterol, the good one and the bad one. This is like the good pride, being proud of what you do. There is a nobility in farming that transcends countries transcends culture. Now, is it the same? No, no, no. It's the farming is not the same. But there is this lady I interviewed for a client in Kenya, and she was very, very well spoken. And I said, "Where are you from?" She said, "I am from here." "Well, where did you go to school?" "Well, I went to Nairobi." "Okay, what do you have a degree?" She started to smile and she said, "I know where you are going. Let me tell you, let me help you. I have a degree in finance and I was a bank branch manager." I said, "Okay, so you come here for the weekend?" He said, "No, no, no. I left the city to go back and start farming. I don't know anything about farming, but farming is what I'm supposed to do." So there is a love for what they do. Now they need help. Sometimes they don't have tools. So sometimes they don't have knowledge. Sometimes they don't have training. And this is what we at Aggrandize do, the organization I'm privileged to partner with, to help BAMs, Business as Missions, to really get operationally excellent in farming so that they can use their profit to reinvest in their mission, whether it's the betterment of community, whether it's a school, whether it's in the healthcare, whether it's a spiritual well-being. So we help these companies that really have an impact and have a vision to help others.
That's amazing. That's amazing, and I appreciate the story of the lady who left banking to become a farmer. My own father was a farmer of pineapples, and there's a certain understanding of how the world works, how life works when you're a farmer. It teaches you patience, it teaches you strategy, but it also teaches you risk management because anything can happen.
Well, funny you are saying this. One of the partners I work with, he farms 14,000 acres in Kansas. And what you said applies to him, whether 14,000 acres or a quarter of an acre in Kenya. You also become, I would add one thing, you become very humble. It's humbling.
Yes.
And there is an Italian say that goes like this. It doesn't sound like as nice as it sounds in Italian, but it says this: soil is low. You need to get down. And it's, there is a certain, as you said, why is that you build patience? Why it's also very heavy. So, and it's low. I rarely seen. I mean, there are some example of aerial farming, but most of farming is very low.
Yes, definitely, definitely. What is the biggest misconception that urban populations have about farmers?
That farming is easy. So here is how it goes. Oh, okay, I'm going to buy a piece of land or lease a piece of land or rent a piece of land. I'm just going to throw some seeds in the air. And I'm going to ask somebody locally when I need to come back to just reap the benefits. Well, if that was as easy as I just described, I'm telling you, the world would be different. So the number one misconception is they don't know about the discipline it takes to farm properly, to farm properly. The other two big misconceptions I've discovered speaking with people from cities, and this one I was shocked. There was a survey on the East Coast asking second or third graders to associate certain products with certain where with the survey was, tell me where this product come from, and there was a multiple choice. Yeah, from underground, from soil, from a tree, from leaves, etc. And what was shocking is that 6 out of 10 kids said that eggs come from a tree.
Wow.
So when you take this and you extrapolate, one of the misconceptions is that people in cities do not know where stuff comes from. They don't understand, not even the basics, not even the very simple. Yeah. So
It's you're reminding me of there's a research study at the University of Chicago. I forgot which. I'm going to try to find it, and if I can find it, I'll send you a link. But they went on the south side of Chicago with an apple and and a tomato, and they would ask the kids outside playing out and say, "Hey, what is this?" Everybody knew what an apple is, right? It's on computers, it's on gadgets. Everybody understands what an apple is. But when they saw the full tomato, 3 out of 10 kids got it, but nobody else. Because in today's life, you eat a slice of tomato, you don't actually see the tomato from fast food
Yeah.
restaurants.
Yes.
That is
So
that is a good point. Yes. When a family loses a farm, walk us through what the emotional and social impact is on that family.
generally, when a family loses a farm, they lose a way of life. They lose their connection with the community. They lose the entire fabric that makes our human experience an experience with other people. You become, all of a sudden, you become isolated and you feel lonely. There is a report with people and a report, a relationship with your farm that allows you relationship with people. This is what you also lose. You don't only lose, see, losing a stock or losing on Wall Street is not immaterial in the sense that it hits you financially, but it's completely agnostic, if I can use this word to explain. You don't, most of the time, you don't even know the company. But most importantly, you definitely don't know the people. When you lose a farm, you lose people. Now, there is an exception. When in certain communities where there is a system, where there is a community system, where everything is actually shared, now all of a sudden it's the community to suffer, but everybody rallies around. So it depends how it's structured. And I will make a third case where, and this is a real one, you may recall in Zimbabwe when Mugabe ordered the chasing the Mzungus, the white farmers, that actually made the backbone of the country from an agriculture standpoint. Everybody out, those that were resisting were killed, women were raped, horrible stories. Some of them had literally to flee, leaving everything.
Mm-hmm.
Now, those were white people, sometimes second generation in Africa, sometimes first generation, sometimes third generation. Well, what happened? Some of them went to southeastern Zambia, which in those days was really not very fertile. It was fertile, sorry, it was not cultivated.
Okay.
And what did they got from the Zambia government? They got permission to start to farm, and they started again. Today, Zambia is what Zimbabwe was before that, is growing as a country. I had a conversation like I'm having with you 3 weeks ago with the permanent secretary of the youth in Zambia. And he was telling me that Zambia is going to become the breadbasket of that entire region, Botswana, Zimbabwe, Zambia, Malawi, because of that. So, but that's a very specific case where people don't give up. They lose and they start again. But they were never completely integrated in the community. They created the community on their own. Whereas I guess where you were coming from your questioning is more like, okay, typical farmer belonging to a village, what does that mean? And you really have a feeling you lose everything and you feel alone.
Yes, but on the example of the Zimbabwe transfer to Zambia, you see that the country as a whole lost out because what often happens, whether it's in the States or anywhere else, the knowledge transfer is important, right? The procedures and the being able to standardize that knowledge across your communities is very important, so you don't lose that knowledge, which can have any proportional impact, a negative impact, if that knowledge was to be lost.
And it has a generational impact, Justin. There is a generational impact. So in the case you mentioned, they took away the knowledge.
Yes.
In other cases, the community has the knowledge, but it's not very sophisticated. One of the things of the areas where we actually are very active is really providing that additional understanding what the gaps are and providing the knowledge that is missing. Sometimes it's chemistry, soil chemistry. Sometimes it's SOP, standard operating procedures. Sometimes it's just the fact that they look at farming in the wrong way. Farming is manufacturing where a plant is actually soil. But if you address it with that mentality, then you develop those disciplines. You can apply lean, you can apply continuous improvement, you can apply CapEx and OpEx, the same approach that there is to business. And these are things that, at least in developing countries, these are concepts that are completely foreign.
Wow. If I know you also work with farmers in the United States, I think one of them is in Kansas, you mentioned. Can you walk the audience through, when you look at farming, what is the difference between OpEx and CapEx, and how do you differentiate the two in a farmer's mind or someone who supports a fund's farm?
Sure. Very simplistically said, OpEx are recurring costs that are expensed within the fiscal year. CapEx are costs that are amortized over years. So you buy a tractor, $500,000, you amortize it over 10 years on your, and then on your financials, you have the amortization. On your P&L, you have the amortization that goes there. Your OpEx, you actually don't have amortization. You have 100% of the cost when it is incurred. And so you needed to be extraordinarily attentive. Two principles that guide the successful farmers, especially in the U.S. Cash is king. And this is for everyone, but for farming, cash is king more than any other sector that I've been working, because without that, there's so many transactions that I'll give you an example. What's happening right now in the Hormuz Strait has an impact on the cost of inputs, on fertilizers.
Correct.
So people with cash, what they do, they buy fertilizers for next year. Normally you would not do this, but you need cash to do that. So cash is king, number one. And the second one, and I credit Kevin Stark, which is the chairman of Aggrandize. He's the gentleman that farms 14,000 acres. He said, farming is you live poor and you die rich. Now think about this. You live poor and you die rich. And the live poor does not mean what it means in Africa.
Yeah.
But it means you need constantly to be mindful of what you do. So I would paraphrase and say, stay humble, and that will bring you to success. But you need just to remind yourself. So where it's important, I'll give you a very simple example. You want to buy a new car because your wife needs a new car, or you want a new car. What car are you going to buy? What's the relevance with your job? Are you going to buy a truck that you can haul some equipment, or are you going to be, well, the cash that goes in the car is a cash that you take away from farming.
Yes.
It's not that you need to live poor. You just need to be constantly very, very careful, because you mentioned earlier, not only patience, but risk management.
Yes.
And in risk management, cash is king.
Cash is king. Cash is king indeed. Do you believe that farming is primarily an economic activity or a cultural responsibility?
It is an economic activity with community impact. Here is where I draw the line. The highway to hell is filled with what? Good intentions. Mm-hmm. So if you take that in the context, it is my responsibility to farm in order to grow the community, and that's the only good intention you have, you're going to fail. If you address it as an economic activity, you can fulfill both. You can be successful and impact the community. But the other way does not work. This is what we are seeing all over. I'm flying in 2 weeks to the country of Eswatini, formerly known as Swaziland,
yes,
for a very big commercial farm. And they have currently issues on the bottom line because they overplayed the community impact versus the economic structure. So we are bringing them back. Have you ever noticed, Justin, on the plane, when they make the announcements on when to put your mask, here is one thing interesting that happened. They say if you have a little child next to you, your son, your daughter, put the mask on you first and then help them. Why? Because you need to be alive when you do that. Well, you need to be economically successful in order to impact the community. Not that you cannot do the other way around.
I agree. I agree. And that sounds like the Swaziland project is going to be a downing one to reverse the issues.
We have good people, and they're listening. So it's downing because it's long. We have actually two projects there, and we have a project in Rwanda that we're helping. Very similar. They lack SOPs, they lack the discipline, and that boils down to the lack of proper education. So they are properly educated, primary school, but then it stops. And so all the foundational building blocks that you and I have, because we have been educated in another part of the world, they don't have those building blocks to help them to build a system to make decisions. They make decisions without the proper tools to make a decision, if this makes sense.
No,
it would take a second interview just to deep dive on that one.
I may take you up on that because that would be an interesting conversation as well.
Absolutely.
I've spent years studying poverty, and you've spent years studying food systems. How much does poverty, how much of poverty starts with food insecurity, whether it's in a different continent or in the United States or in Central America?
What makes food insecurity part of the poverty dilemma is actually a lack of entrepreneurship. Yeah. But the lack of entrepreneurship is not something that can be inputted, that can be guilted, that people can be guilted with. But it starts by not having those muscles of resiliency other than those to survive in order to make something out of nothing. So allow me to go back to Eswatini. Let me share a few statistics. 90% of males have HIV, 70% of males are out of a job. And it's a fertile country. How is this possible that 70% of people are out of a job? Well, when you peel back the onion and you look into the history of Swaziland, it has been built on government subsidies for generations after generations after generations. Why should I exercise or develop a muscle that I've never needed? So now the subsidies are coming down. All of a sudden, I'm deprived by every single tools that I need. Go with me to the US. Have you never asked yourself, why is that so many private military that retire, go back to the civilian work, commit suicide? I have a lot of connections in the military community, and that is one thing that really intrigued me. And during a conversation with a two-star general, a retired general, he said, well, you don't understand. When you leave the military and you have not built a system on your own, you are used to have everything done for you. You have very little things to do that civilians have to fight every single day. So as strange as it sounds, when you get out of the military, you are lacking the basic tools that you need to actually succeed in a society. Let's go back to farming. Poverty starts here. In the head, doesn't start in the belly. You make something out of nothing. I have seen kids making money in Beirut or on the streets of Cotonou or Abidjan in the Ivory Coast by collecting aluminum cans and plastic bottles and bringing them to a recycling facility. Now, don't start to argue that these are kids, they should not be working. They're not working. They are trying to make a living and get out of this poverty circle. So they do something. And there is a great chance that they will want to get an education. They will want to become someone. So it really starts. Food insecurity is a very, very tedious because it's a catch-22. There is a vicious circle,
Yes.
and it comes back. And it's a blaming game. And the fatalism comes on top of that and said, well, I was not supposed to eat. Um, and and we can help, but we need to be very careful how we help, because we don't want to go back in the subsidy model, which a lot of agencies, including USAID, are notorious to do. They will never solve a problem. They will constantly tell you how to solve the problem, but they will never solve the problem.
That's right.
And
That's
telling you how to solve why is that we have this big people? What's the solution? What are you doing? And it's dangerous to generalize. There's a lot of good people working for these agencies, but we have addressed this, and it goes down, Justin, to the very old say that we all have heard: is it preferable to give a fish or to teach to fish? I know it's a cliche and it's overplayed, but it's really
overplayed. But what you're saying is very profound. I graduated from Valley Forge Military Academy, which is a military prep school before you go to the military academies. But and a lot of my friends were veterans, and I've always thought about that issue when they come back in reentry. And I've always my theory has always been you lose mission, right? When you lose that mission, you're misguided, and like you said, there's a lot of things that not necessarily get done for you, but they're decided for you. So your brain is not used to make decisions. But when you're a farmer or when you're an entrepreneur, you learn that you're solving problems on a consistent basis, and you're thinking through problems on a consistent basis. And the more you make decisions, the faster you learn how to make better decisions. And that muscle that you're referring to, whether if you come from a subsidy mindset or where a lot of the things, food production and clothing and housing is provided for you, you never build that muscle to assess what risks, anticipate what problems, make decisions to put something aside to solve so your brain is not used to solve problems on a consistent basis. And that, I think that's a problem you see both in different countries as well as in the United States, where if you cut off subsidies, people lose their mind because they haven't built that pattern recognition of solving problems and expecting problems and welcoming problems, because it gives you a chance to solve them, and you get fulfillment from that. And entrepreneurs have that, but others don't.
Absolutely, I can't agree more.
Very interesting. Now, you helped reduce post-harvest grain losses by 90% in Egypt. Most people don't realize how much food gets lost before it gets to consumers. Can you walk us through that problem? Paint us a picture.
Yeah, big picture. And here is go with me not to Egypt, although if you'd like we can talk about Egypt. Go with me to Uganda.
Okay.
Post-harvest losses in grains, rice, maize, wheat, in grains, is 40%, and it's defined at every loss from the harvest to the fork, to when you actually can eat the food. 40%, Justin. Do you know in tonnage how much grains are given by through USAID by the American people to Uganda? Sufficient to fulfill the 40%. We'll go back to that topic, but I would like to answer your question. 40%. So if we develop a system that brings that 40% down to below 5%, which is the acceptable percentage in developed countries, so US, Canada, Europe, Argentina, it's below 5% on grains. Every single farmer could actually keep a significant amount of grain and therefore increase their income, their revenue significantly without one more square foot, without having to work one more square foot on their farm. 5 main reasons, capital reasons, that determine this post-harvest loss. In no particular order: theft, people stealing grains, stealing from all over. Egypt is notorious for that, about 15%. Rodents. When you don't store it properly, you're going to have rodents coming in and eating up everything that you have. Then you have birds and birds dropping, not only food for birds, so they pick in your sack, they open it, but in your bag, but also the droppings are certainly not very good. Insects, you have that. And last but not least, moisture. So when you expose grains to high moisture, when the grain is wet, it rots. Very simple.
Yeah.
So when you take these, and what we did back in the days, we take this and basically we developed a system that addresses these five the five reasons, and we build a system that avoids this. Now, all of a sudden, you find yourself in a position where you can exercise arbitrage and you can store your grain until the price goes up. Do you know, go with me to Zambia. Do you know what the volatility of maize pricing throughout the season is? So if we draw an average, a line throughout the year, it goes 25% below that average during harvest time, and it goes 20 to 25% above that average line at peak, which is just a few months before the next harvest.
I see.
What if you can store and you give a receipt to the farmer? He can take a loan based using the receipt as a collateral for his living. And when he makes the money 9 months later, he can pay back the loan, pay back the co-op that has stored his grain, and make a significant amount of money, not only because the price is different, but because the quantity is different. Right now, this morning, I just finalized a few things. I'm going, in 2 weeks, I will be down in Zimbabwe, working to build grain aggregator centers that do exactly that. They work with community farmers, small farmers. They come with a bag, 2 bags, 5 bags, and we are building a system very similar to what I did in Egypt to allow the proper storage of bags, but to impact the community and give back. So they get more because there is no loss or minimal loss. They get more because they can wait to get to their money. So this is why you heard me saying it's an incredible opportunity. And 5 of these aggregation centers can change a country, can change the southern region of Zambia. 5 of them.
That's amazing. Why do we have such a gap, almost a 35% margin gap between developing countries and developed countries on systems that have been identified and where solutions exist?
Well, that was my battle in Uganda with USAID. And I know what I'm about to share can be controversial, but here is what the USAID officer that I spoke with said to me. Because what I did was very simple. I said, look, buy the system from us. In 5 years, we can be out of Uganda and help another country. And they become self-reliant and self-sufficient because we just need to address the real problem. I said, are you crazy? I would be out of a job, number one.
Wow.
And the second answer was like, how will we continue to be able to influence the policies in the country if they don't need us anymore from a food standpoint? I heard
this directly from a USAID officer.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, is that an individual answer? Obviously, if you go to an agency like this, they will tell you that I probably misheard. That's probably what is going to happen. Yeah. But Justin, I'm here to tell you that the biggest difference, how is that? Let me ask you this. Well, it's a rhetorical question. How is that the white farmers that came from Zimbabwe had nothing, were given a free lease for 99 years, free use of land, as long as they were farming? Why is that their post-harvest loss is not 5, but very close to 5%? They
Wow.
implemented the right procedures. They implemented everything they knew how to get successful. When you don't have ownership, it becomes chaotic. When those storage, like in Egypt, those shuna, they're called shuna, where wheat is held, there are open structures. There is a micro corruption that goes on where people that are supposed to avoid theft are actually taking a cut on the theft. And you see this all over. Egypt is the second largest importer of wheat in the world after Japan. And Egypt is losing so much wheat for these reasons, and so it's endemic. It becomes very quickly community issue. Go with me to Nigeria. Why are entire communities living out of spillage of oil from pipelines?
Yeah.
Isn't it illegal? Yes, but it's done. And so there is also a level when you see this endemic, you needed to choose your battles, and probably nobody wants to take on these. Those that do are successful, and we can get to where we needed to be from a post-harvest standpoint.
Well, yeah, and the farmers that went from Zimbabwe to Zambia are essentially the control group because they've replicated the same thing in two different countries in the same continent. So it's very hard to think that it cannot be replicated elsewhere. Um, and I always say it's especially, I'm originally from Burundi myself. And the other day I was having a conversation and somebody asked me what the African countries can do. I always say it's not necessarily the power structures, it's at the individual and the family level. It's going through a paradigm shift that says you don't need permission to create opportunity
No,
because it benefits everyone. And
and you don't need the
sometimes we're
government.
always waiting for a permission to help each other.
Yeah. Well, you said something earlier in our conversation. Is it an economic activity or a community responsibility? If you take the community responsibility approach to storage, then you allow theft, then you allow corruption, then you allow all the things that are really not conducive to making this successful. If you address it as an economic activity, now all of a sudden you treat it as a plant, you treat it as an industry, you treat it as an economic activity, as a business, and there is a likelihood that the mindset changes and a likelihood that the impact changes.
So if you were advising, let's say, a president, an African president, and South American president, what three agriculture investments would you advise that they prioritize immediately?
I had this conversation just with the permanent secretary of the youth, and he asked me that very same question. Number one, invest on people by giving and youth, giving them an opportunity, not a handout, not a handout. So invest in that. Continue to give land in the way you do and build the backbone of supply chain. So the entire value chain very also often is only looked at here and there instead of looking this organically. Allow me to make an example. If you are growing avocado or dragon fruit or any type of a product that requires refrigeration, and you don't think about the logistics of refrigerated trucks, and you don't think about the logistics of refrigerated storage places, you're dead in the water. You have your greatest dragon fruit that they last only as long as they last, a very short period of time. When you don't introduce technologies such as modified atmosphere storage to allow to prolong the shelf life, you're dead in the water. But nobody thinks about the storage because it's not farming. It's not, oh, what's the community impact of a cold storage? Well, actually, it belongs to the same. Why do we use the word chain when we use the word supply chain? Why chain? Because chain is made of links. And if one breaks, the entire chain breaks. So you have to create all these links and they need to work. Your country needs to have good infrastructure, good roads. Well, what does that have to do? Because you need to move stuff. So, so what, at the end of the day, it was about people. It was about the opportunity of land and then infrastructure, the right infrastructure. The countries that are doing this are becoming very successful. Um, Look, Rwanda is one of those. I'm sorry, I cannot say the same thing about Burundi, Lubumbashi, although it's a nice city, but Burundi has stayed. There is a lot of historical reasons we don't need to go
There's
into.
definitely reasons. Yes, yes.
Yeah, but if you look into what happened to Rwanda after the genocide, I'm sure you will agree with me that it's the greatest lesson, living lesson of what the country can do after a tragedy, after everybody lost everyone. But yet, they decided as a country to move on. And yes, is it perfect? Absolutely not. But where it is today, it is creating the infrastructures to become really successful. So that those are the three things I would speak with constantly.
Those are excellent. Those are excellent and excellent examples. What lessons can the United States learn from emerging agricultural economies? Are there any lessons that could be coming the other way?
Yes. You probably have heard about regen ag, which has become like a buzzword. Blockchain was the buzzword a few years ago. Now regen ag. What's regen ag? And in the US, regen ag very quickly was associated with 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 the green movement, with the fact that okay, we needed to reduce scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, and therefore, and you know how it goes in the US, every conversation that has a solid scientific grounds very quickly becomes a political conversation, and sides are taken. No one is right, no one is wrong. They pick and choose a few things and they make it their narrative. So when it comes on regen ag, it was the ownership was taking more on the liberal green, save the planet group of people. Well, actually, regen ag is nothing more than actually going back on basics, how the soil wants to be treated, needs to be treated. So guess where regen ag has been practiced for years? In Africa.
Yeah.
So there is a lot of things that you can learn from there that can be done. Now, and also the other one is that you don't need to make things perfect to make things work. And sometimes we get caught in chasing the last little corner or chasing the last little dollar. This is where greed starts to come in the midst of farming, of business. And you lose those elements you talked about very earlier, the humility, the approach, the way of life. So what we can learn is going back to those countries and rediscover where we came from. Not that we came from there, what farming came from, how it should be done. It's a way of life. So sometimes in the US, we have gone a little bit overboard, just to summarize it. Overboard and greed has taken place. If you like a series, and I don't want to do free advertisement, but if you look at a series like Yellowstone, you understand what I'm saying.
Yes.
It goes to the fact that you're ready to kill, and that is not what was done. So you prevent excesses when you go back.
No, I agree. Are there any technologies that are coming up within the agricultural world that most people haven't heard of?
Absolutely.
Like to share?
Absolutely. So I'm a private pilot, and one of the things I did when the whole drone thing came out, I took my federal license to operate drones. The first industry that I saw could benefit from that technology was not real estate, was agriculture. And today you see drone all over in Africa. You see them all over, used very regularly for terrain survey, but then you change the optics, you change your camera, you change the optics of your camera. All of a sudden you have infrared and you can now learn from the soil. This is just one example, and everybody is using it. It's really something fascinating. Now, the other one that is really, really taking place has to do with traceability. So Europe, especially in Europe, people want to know exactly where that particular fruit comes from, down to the field, down to the farmer. Now, technology can help you to do this, and the tools and the efforts, especially in Eastern Africa. I don't know if comes to a surprise to you, but Nairobi has a hub where it's an incubator of emerging companies of young kids, and it's all about coming up with new tools, new platforms to help agriculture and other way of lives in East Africa, and it's fascinating. I'll give you another example. Africa has become a digitized payment system as a continent.
Yes.
Everybody has a Momo account. Everybody has the digital money. Nobody gets paid cash no, it's all on your phone. And yet it's in Africa. And last but not least, everybody talks about, and it has become the buzzword for these last 2 years, AI. But I'm here to tell you that the tailored AI and leveraging because what is then at the end of the day, AI is the ability to access information that normally you would not access. So you think of these LLMs as gigantic databases where it's so big that you can not only find the information, but you can reformulate and mix them and come up with something that we human beings can actually read it. So now you have your business plan drawn in 2 minutes instead of 5 days.
That's right.
But in agriculture, there is so much you can actually draw. And those platforms that run on very cheap phones use AI and help the farmers make more educated decisions. So that is really gaining traction.
That's amazing. This is a trick question, but we'll see how you responded. If you had unlimited capital and 1,000 acres, what would your dream agricultural operation look like? But I guess it's based on location where you are, but go ahead.
Okay, let's take 100,000 acres, not 1,000, 100,000.
Okay.
Unlimited cash. You would do a subsistence crop, so row crops, maize to feed people, whether it's within J.Mah. You would rotate them with soybeans. You would rotate them, and then you would take a 10% of that 100,000, and you would do specialty crops. So you would do crops that had higher values, higher value, and also higher nutritional content. The crops I'm talking about are crops with high level of proteins, and this introduces something that we tend to forget. Farming is very often associated with poor. If it's an industry, as I said, or manufacturing, as I said earlier, poor margins. Well, it depends. There are some very or poor food. It really depends what you are farming. You can have superfoods. You can have high protein content vegetables that you can actually farm, and you can actually make very good money by feeding Europe with that investment. And I chose 100,000 for a reason. There is actually an investor that is talking to do exactly that. It's an impact investor, and he is just talking about scaling this because he recognizes that you need to reach a certain amount to justify certain investments.
Yes.
When it comes on equipment and infrastructure. So that's what I would do. And, we live with bread. You need what? Well, you need wheat, you need flour, and that is where it comes from. It's very elementary. I wouldn't go overly sophisticated in looking into, but I would take a 10%, making it more interesting, and maybe a 1% on very, very special things, such as vanilla, as an example, or moringa. Those are superfoods. One is a superfood. The other one is a very high profit margin flavor add using the flavor industry. But having said this, go back to basics. Go back to do really the basics and what people need.
Well, you just built, when you look at the 100,000 acres, is what I learned in banking. You're essentially building an investment portfolio, and you're diversifying the risk in
Yes.
margin and revenue side. So
Yes. Yes. And I
yeah,
said it's very similar. It's just that, but the approach is the same. You're absolutely right.
great. I think it's going to be that's a good point for our audience who may be professionals and find farming as a foreign subject versus there's a process to it to think through that scenario. Uh, Now, you also studied family enterprise governance at Kellogg, I believe. Uh,
Mhm.
why do so many family businesses survive one generation, but not three, four, five?
Um, I noticed that the most successful uh, generational wealth transfer families are those that are able to, in a continuous way and in a sustainable way and in a consistent way, that's the word I was looking for, in a consistent way, to differentiate the values from the wealth. So these are two different things. But when you build a generation that is spoiled, what you actually do, you think you give, but actually you take away.
Mhm.
You take away the ability for that person, which in this case is your son or your daughter, to learn and to be able one day to have the same relationship with the business that you have. I have a great example I worked for a family-owned multi-billion-dollar food business, and I observed the relationship between the father, the executive chairman, and the son, who is going to be the next executive chairman. They can have endless conversations about business and money, but when it comes on their private life, it is a life of privilege, don't get me wrong,
Sure.
but there is a difference. There is a huge difference. You just don't mix these two worlds. And you do this by doing the upbringing and really keeping these two worlds separated. Because one of the things that you lose is the perspective, is the respect that the business deserves. All of a sudden, the business becomes your bank.
Mhm. Right.
It's a very simple thing. Make a division, separate that. Here's your account, here's the business account. Don't mix those. If it happens, then have mechanisms in place where you create accountability. And the lack of accountability is what you remove when you spoil the next generation.
Right. They essentially believe that the money will always come through, will always come in, and then
Yeah.
there's a shock. Things fall apart very quickly.
I,
Um, Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I studied a few wealthy families that have a last name that are very well known in the US. And every time it went down, whether it's a brewery of Milwaukee or a bigger consortium of businesses, when then it breaks down, every time I see a family tragedy behind, I see the breaking down of the fabric of the family. And so really keeping that together is probably a good ingredient for success.
Yeah. Christian, you repeatedly describe yourself as a servant leader. What does servant leadership look like when difficult decisions have to be made?
Reminding that it's not about yourself, separating yourself from the decision, and prioritizing the decision and the impact on whether it's the business or the community, but the other side. You need to keep yourself removed from that. I have a say, when there is something that I want to say for me, this is what I do. I said, allow me just to remove my hat for 1 second. Whatever hat I have, is it a board hat? Is it a senior executive hat? And I start to speak in the third person, as if Now I'm vouching for this guy, which happens to be me, but trying to keep the distance. You see,
I see what
uh, like one of the things that I catch myself as, in my humble opinion, something to improve, every time you use the word I, you fail.
Mm.
So I would do this. Uh, have you considered an alternative approach like this? It's about you, it's not about me. So it's all constantly reminding. Do I do it perfectly? Absolutely not. Sometimes there are some screws up. I said, I should not have done this. But at least the intent is this: you separate yourself because ultimately you're serving a greater purpose. You're serving a greater purpose. And I don't care the role you have, including the owner, including the owner. It's not you. It's if you have this ability to consider the sacredness of the business that you started, or your family started, and to separate yourself. There was a famous president of France that said in a public speech, I will say it in English, I am France. When you say something so outrageous and arrogant, you understand then what the implications are, what the consequences are. Versus other people, take a Mandela. Have you ever heard the Mandela saying, I am South Africa?
No, he would never.
I mean, and so you take a distance. He was the one reaching out. He was the one who understood. It's not about white and black. It's about the togetherness. It's about the country. So, and I'm using these polar opposite because that's a good example. Take yourself away. Remove yourself. Have those conversations when you're hired. That's when you needed to fight for yourself. That's when, but be very clear always when you talk. Is it about me or is it about you? In this podcast, it's about you. It's about your audience. It's about whoever is listening. It has nothing to do with me.
It's funny from my perspective. It's about you. It has nothing to do with me.
No, you use me, and I mirror back, but it's actually serving your own community on the podcast.
Correct.
It's not about you. It's not about me.
Well said. Well said. A few more questions, sir, and thank you for your patience. When you enter a struggling operation, what signals tell you whether the issue or the problem is in the process, in the people, or in the leadership? How do you distinguish that? What signals do you look for?
I would simply prioritize them. It always starts with people because a process cannot be implemented without people.
With people, yeah.
There is then the element of resources. So if the issue is strictly a lack of resource, you look for indicators, and you actually look for lagging and leading indicators, trying to and frame the issue historically. One of the things that I noticed, and there are two polar aspects. Europeans have the tendency to overlook into history before, and then they're overly prudent in looking forward. Americans have a tendency to overly look into the future and underestimate the lessons of the past. Yeah. I believe that there is wisdom in learning from the lessons of the past. So why am I saying this? Which is, again, a little bit a cliche. Very simple, because when you face an issue, look into the history. Look what happened. Is this a trend? Is this something? What have you done in the past? And by the response, so you start really by interviewing. By the response, you will immediately understand whether the system is endemic, it can be isolated outside of people, or if the issue is intimately linked with people. And most of the time, it's a mix of both.
You know what? I've used that technique in when I'm working through bureaucracy here in America. You'll go up to a desk, a front desk or service desk, and say, "Hey, I want to do X, Y, Z." And the first answer you'll hear is, "No, we don't do that," or "No, you can't do that." And then I always come back with, "Has there ever been a time you've heard about this issue, and what was done then?" And then instantly you can see the eyes. It's just, there's a nervous system twig, and they're like, "Oh yeah, this one time that person went to speak to this manager and this manager and this director, and they got it done. I'm like, can I please do the same exact process? But you have to kind of prompt it to actually get the exception process that's built in within the system, but not always clear and available to everybody.
Yeah. Breaking down barriers.
Now, all right, one last question. If every world leader had to spend one season working on a farm before taking office, how would government change?
Incredibly and substantially, and for a long time, not for the short term. The lessons you learn in agriculture are never lessons that are only useful for the short term. And what you learn on farming impacts and lasts and has an impact over the long term. Government is often seen is one of two ways. It's often seen to serve people at the very beginning, and then it transforms into serving yourself because you are in the government. And then it becomes a poison. Machiavelli was known for many things, but one thing that he said was but governing is a poison that affects those that do not govern. And why he said this, he used the word poison, and I'm a very strong supporter of limited terms for people in office, because office is about serving the community based on what you learned yourself in business. Right. So you would become a better politician, a better policymaker. You would look into the long term because of your activity in farming. But then you needed to do this with a short term and go back. Governing in itself is not serving the people, especially if it's prolonged over time. There is a few exceptions, but there is always a risk that it becomes self-serving.
I agree. Can you tell the audience who Aggrandize is and what kind of services you provide, and how someone could reach you or the company if they want to have a further question?
Absolutely. So Aggrandize is a 501c3 nonprofit that is headquartered in the area of Kansas City. We're a bunch of volunteers. So I call them full-time volunteers. So I take it as a job, although not paid, that aggregate and get together and help BAMs, business as missions, in agriculture to solve their issues and to improve and to get better. And we operate in the developing countries, Central Asia mostly, and Africa. I personally, I'm the leader for Africa. I oversee all the projects in Africa, but I'm currently in Panama because we actually so we operate in three ways. We operate either in consulting agreements, or in a financing agreement, or in mentoring agreement. So on the consulting, it's more on the operational excellence side, the processing side, and then we have a little seed fund that we use to help companies. So we organize two events every year called Joseph Summits. One is in India, the other one is in Central Asia. And through this, we have access to young entrepreneurs that come up with a new idea. If we like it, if it clicks all the boxes, then we'll help them with some funds. But we are very specific. It's a Christian organization, and we're very open. It's not a denominational, very open, and we help these organizations to fulfill the mission that they have. Ultimately, it's never about farming, but it's the one in Eswatini has an orphanage with 550 and counting orphans. Well, you need to feed them, and you can feed them with food, or you can feed them with proceeds from food. So there's always something that is associated with those. We can be found on agrandizeglobal.com. That's the website of the organization. And that's what we do.
Excellent. Christian, it's been a pleasure and an honor to have this conversation and learn from you. Thank you very much for sharing your knowledge with our audience.
Well, Justin, the pleasure was mine. I really enjoyed this hour of conversation, and I look forward for more.
Absolutely. Look forward for more from us as well. Thank you, and have a great day, sir.
Thank you. Same to you. Have a good day.
Cheers. Yeah.